Well, welcome aboard. It's 2021 and APF's first Friday gathering on the second Friday of the month. We have 5 Fridays, but it's a wonderful time to be together, to be working the future together as professionals and colleagues. And we're looking forward to a fantastic year in APF. Our Emerging Fellows program has already been started. You should catch the blogs. Thank you, Stephen Agler, Milan, and team. Our task force on foresight evaluation is gearing up to hold their meetings. And we have today we have the representative Canadian who will be gathering in Toronto, hopefully, a Toronto 2021 global gathering, Jean-Pierre Lacroix. And it's a privilege to have you with us, Jean-Pierre, to talk about getting clients excited about the future, and more particularly, embracing future transformation. Now, the talks today, as you hear me talking off each time, they are on the web, usually 24 hours later. You can get past talks right under the top item. I'm going to type here in chat the slides for today, because the slide deck that Jean-Pierre is bringing you will want to know more about, and you'll want to follow along later as well as during it. Let me say a few things about Jean-Pierre. He's a futurist, and because he's come from the field of innovation, strategy, design. He leads one of Canada's foremost branding consultancies, 3 different cities worldwide, 50 different partners full-time working with him in those contexts. He's going to share 2 case studies today with us, but he's illustrating what the back end of our competency model illustrates, which is visioning, design, and adaptation. We often practice foresight on the front end in terms of framing, scanning, and futuring, right? Alternative futures. And Jean-Pierre's firm backed into that, unknowingly, and embraced that. But they also have taking foresight into action. So I want you to listen to him about how his firm prototypes the future with his clients, and they actually look at future roles within different companies, how to redefine their role, redefine their business services and business models. So with that, Jean-Pierre, I'm going to stop sharing. Welcome. You're not a stranger to APF, but we had a fantastic 12 noon time. It's 5 p.m. London, so it's time to listen to you again. So take it away.
Okay, so you see the slides on the screen?
Sure do.
Okay. Just do full view. Okay, hopefully this works. All right. Okay, so to build on Jay, we do a lot of strategic foresight exercises, and inevitably what happens is the client will say, okay, this is great. How do we action these insights, these scenarios? How do we bring them to life? What are the steps and strategies? And there's a bit of a pause there because a lot of these scenarios are so far-fetched that it's really hard to connect where they are today in the organization. And what I'm going to share with you is kind of what we learned how to connect those dots and create that journey. Now, we're quite unique. We did this presentation this morning to our colleagues in the UK, 7 a.m. this morning. And the question was, well, JP, you're a design firm, a brand consulting firm. You view it as design. And yes, we do view it as design once the scenarios are established. But what leads up to scenario is all about strategic foresight. So did you see the next slide? I just want to make sure you see that.
Yes, sure do.
Okay, good. Seeing is believing, and believing is knowing, and knowing beats unknowing and the unknown. Really, I love this quote because it really captures both the benefits and the challenges of strategic foresight. We don't know what we don't know, and our job is to actually identify those, right? And to bring those to the forefront. So we view ourselves in the business ultimately of creating clients' vision of their unknown better future, right? So we often, and this is how we kind of reverse engineered strategic foresight for us, because we were trying to overcome this mindset of incrementalism. We all face it, right? Where Yeah, that's great to see these scenarios, but I've got this quarterly earning report that I need to do. I hope you're going to help me connect that with what I have to do this year in organization. And then what if you pull away, and we've all done these transformational programs or the future scenarios, but when you really sit down and talk to the clients, their biggest fear is fear of change. They understand the scenarios, they can buy in, they were part of the journey, they are part of providing input. It was a collaborative effort, inclusive. But at the end, what inhibits them from taking these ideas, these scenarios, and making them actionable is this fear of change, right? The risk. Because what we're trying to do is connect the known, which is their biases, and we all work hard at overcome these biases, to the unknown, which is fear for them. And why is this a challenge? We've done numerous studies on strategic foresight. This is in transformation. We did 2 studies last year. We asked, what are the challenges that face you on transformation? And too many conflicting priorities. The number one, to lack of resources, lack of funding, and these were about strategic foresight. So what are the challenges we face? So when we do these exercises and provide those different scenarios or the 3 waves of transformation, there's a lot of things. One is assumptions that the clients have about, or we call them biases. It's also the reward system. Let's be candid. The odds that the CEO that hired us to do the strategic foresight is still in his position after year 5 is like 10%. The reality is you're going to have a new CEO, you're going to have a new CMO, you're going to have a new director of innovation or EVP of innovation that's going to be part of this exercise before we even come close to creating actionable. Obviously, disruption. Let's take one of our clients is a CPG brand, and sustainability was really important part of this future scenario. Well, guess what? Lack of inventory, getting the inventory to the stores, that trumped any long-term strategy that disrupted the entire apple cart. Incrementalism, which follows how we, different conflicting priorities, lack of resources, the consolidation of the industry and government debt. These are just many of the challenges that we face, that once we do this strategic foresight exercise and we establish these future visions with all of the right reasons, rational and viability and potential impact, we still struggle to connect those with action. And then when we did another study on strategic foresight, 90% noted the challenge in linking foresight into action. So when we asked companies, are you aware of strategic foresight? Do you use strategic foresight? How effective is it? 19% basically said, yeah, we do it. We just can't connect the strategy to the scenarios. And interesting enough, we've just finished and we're continuing to do an online survey as we speak as part of our conference for 2021 in October. And we asked a lot of you to fill out the survey, and to let you know that the number one topic about strategic foresight, about how to improve strategic foresight, was exactly this. 88% of you indicated the challenge of linking strategic foresight to action. So hopefully I'm going to give you some ideas here. And why is this so important? Because basically, as we know, 80% of the companies we know today will be around. It's just disruption is happening at such a rapid scale. And the fact is, it's not about strategic foresight. Yes, we still have to sell, and people kind of roll their eyes. Does that mean I got to look at this 5, 10 years? What about next year? But it isn't about the process. Clients who buy in on strategic foresight understand the value it brings. The problem is filling the gap between future vision and execution. Really, we see that as being the big challenge. And probably the hesitation why they would engage in strategic foresight. They're going, okay, that's great. We'll come up with these different scenarios. Then what? And how does that impact the business? So our solution, we learned this. Actually, what I'm sharing with you was a challenge we faced in the transformation of 2 large organizations. And it's like, a thought we had about, how do we overcome these challenges of connecting these strategic foresights to execution? And it's through creating steps, call it the trust ladder. And you can read this, I'm not gonna go into great detail, but the trust ladder is all about level of transformation and level of complexity and risk. And as you go up in the trust ladder, if you did the jump from the level 1 to level 5, which is what JCPenney did 10 years ago or 7 years ago and failed, they failed because the strategy was right, the vision was right, the direction was right, but instead of breaking down the transformation into 6 or 7 steps, they did the bold jump from step 1, level 1 to level 7, and in that process lost trust with consumers and employees and the investment community. And for every one of these steps, there's a series of stages that we need to go through. We need to go from reflecting relevance to the stakeholders to the validation at the top that this level of transformation, as we deconstruct it towards the future scenario, that we've achieved it so that we can then move on building trust to the next step. And this trust is built by bringing the organization, the customers, the stakeholders, the investors along on the journey and building that trust with them as we progress. But I added this slide because out of this morning's session, they said, hey, JP, it's not a linear, it's great that you got these steps and they all go in different, go on one line, but the reality does work that way. And you're right. And actually the metaphor we used for one of our projects was stakes and ladder. That, depending on where you land in that transformation, on that journey towards the future vision, take COVID, you move up the ladder for environmentally sensitive packaging, but here's COVID, and you've taken the snake all the way back down to where you started, or the etcher where you may be going up the steps this way, but all of a sudden, because of an event in the marketplace or one of the trends accelerates or one of those weak signals becomes a significant impact, your trajectory changes direction. So understand that this is not a linear, and with a lot of agility, it has to flex. So having said that, I'm going to walk you through 2 projects. One is we've been asked to reinvent the role of the Chief Financial Officer for an organization called FEI. FEI stands for Financial Executives International, and they represent the CEOs around the world. You have to be a CEO of a large organization to join this association. And they were having challenges. We had done a UNA study and found out that, that their role through technology was really being challenged. And they really need to find a better future, a future unknown, a future that hadn't been established, and that they could build the curriculum and the learning and the disciplines to get them there. So the scenarios that we mapped out were based on humanistic and technology, input versus output. And really where they were playing is about accuracy. CFOs were all about ensuring the numbers are right, because if we have to do a correction, it has a huge impact on the stocks, credibility of the company, credibility of my bonus, all of that fun stuff. Where we wanted to take them to, knowing that technology was going to change a lot of the industry, it's going to automate, it's going to provide a lot more efficiencies in the role, that the CFO had a bigger role in this insight, this predictability of the business, and being able to harness these different tools. So that's the area that we focused on. We said, of all the scenarios, let's focus on this insight, this predictability, output-driven position in the marketplace. And we define that as strategic advisor. We said this place, this future, and I'll let you know the gap of what this is and where they are was enormous. We're talking 10, 15 years to be able to achieve this. And our goal was to see if we couldn't accelerate that. And I said there were significant gaps on what they were been relegated to being bean counters, relegated to not really providing a lot of foresight, no strategy. And so to do that, we wanted to create this transformation. We identified the future state. What are the steps we would take? And we broke it down into 3 large buckets. Understanding, which is the foundation, and which is basically where they are, which is really helping the organization from a standpoint of providing financial reports and statements and dealing with shareholders and the stock market and all of this, monitoring the financial viability of the organization, all this stuff, that's foundational work. And it's all about understanding. What does that look like on our steps? Is really strong financial capabilities. Because if you don't do that, you can't move on to the next step of knowledge of the business. If you're not actually providing accurate information, financial reporting, how can you really understand the business? And if you really don't understand the business, how do you provide reliable financial reporting? So it's step after step, but it's foundational work. And this is where they are today. But it's about trust. At every stage of this, depending on the sophistication of the organization, some CFOs have already passed this stage. Some are at the strong financial capabilities. The next is what we call facilitation. And they're, they have a right to play as a strategic advisor because they touch all of the different organizations within a company. Because all the metrics, the dashboards, the financial reporting, they all come to the CFO, right? And so they have a pulse across the entire organization, looking at the performance of the organization in its entirety, from HR, IT, to sales, and profitability. What does that look like in steps? Promote ethical business practices, offer solutions to the business. So moving from the CFO of no, which is, they're definitely defined by, their answer is always no matter how important it is and critical to the company. They've been trained to say no because with the request means dollars and risk. And so moving them from this, CFO of no to this offering solutions to the business units. And then obviously if you do that, adding value to the organization is the next step. And then the final is understanding, which is really the most critical, and that's becoming a strategic advisor, becoming that support to the CEO. What does that look like? Drive future business performance. How many of you have been hired by a CFO to do for the strategic foresight? The answer is probably 0, right? It comes from innovation. It comes maybe from risk, but not from the CFO. We're going to see a future where the CFO is going to play a much more important role on being a strategic advisor, strategic foresight, and then communicate strategic direction to the organization. And then that leads to, if you do all those things, leads to being a strategic advisor. And we looked at all the gaps, the skill gaps that the organization had to do, that we would have to, as an association, train them to achieve that. And you can understand on this trust ladder, some CFOs are actually at the top rung and some are at the bottom rung. What was important to understand is where the end state was, and then what are the steps someone would take in their career. How do they build their credibility within the organization to be a strategic advisor? And then we did their website and repositioned the brand, and their tagline is leadership beyond finance, which was for CFO a huge statement. So you can see how this model works. Let's do another model, Office Max. Office Max hired us really to downsize their stores. They were getting killed by Amazon and by Walmart. The 27,000 square foot big box retail in the suburbia really wasn't working. And they asked us, how do we downsize our store size? And what we said to them is that the problem isn't about downsizing. The problem is that you're in a margin erosion business. Selling a staple, you used to sell it and make a margin of 30%, you're making penny margin. And that as a model, a business model, you need to evolve into more complex added value services that small businesses own. And by the way, we identified that as you shrink your store, you're going to actually alienate a certain segment of the population, certain target group, because you're not going to have the inventory in that store that's going to appeal to them. So we got them focused on small business owners because we felt that was where the growth and the opportunity was for Office Max. It was kind of underdeveloped. And then we did the trust ladder here. And we looked at, going towards this future vision of being like to an added value sale, providing advice to small business owners, providing thought leadership and platforms versus commoditized products. There were things that they were doing poorly. So, convenient locations, competitive pricing, customer service, reliability, they did poorly. But on the metrics such as productivity tools and programs, they outpaced the competition. So this clearly identified that they had a right to play in this advisor, this, being the advocate for the small business owner, that they had that credibility that they could build on. So we developed we developed the 3 horizon model. So business as usual. So just take the existing store, shrink it down to 20 or maybe 18,000 square feet, done, close the stores, open new stores. Game changing was really your business exchange, which was really to start leveraging a lot of the added value services, HR, marketing, sales, IT infrastructure, all of the, financial mergers and acquisition, all of these services that are pivotal to small businesses that candidly no one at the time was providing. The market shaping was really, guys, the future is everything's going to be bought online, right? The odds of you selling a staple or selling a commoditized item, other than in a panic where you need toner, it's all going to be online because Amazon and the Walmarts of the world are going to deliver it to your door the next day. So, and then we mapped out these as part of scenario planning with their management team. We did a 3-day workshop where we planned and mapped all of these scenarios out, created customer journey stories, and then we took it to research. We actually did a benchmark study to find out what are the trust ladder steps that we need to take in order to bridge that from where we are to where we need to be. And then we use this research to validate our future planning scenarios, which one resonated with. So this is kind of business as usual. This was game changing. So really dialing up technology in the store, where the mix, 50% of what they're selling was going to be technology driven. And that's everything from security, routers, printers, all of the technology. And at the back of the store, dialing up the services, going beyond just print, and introducing a small business advisor that would go out in the community and help small businesses grow their business. And then the disruptive concept was your go-to expert, where there was no product in the stores, that you can buy all that product online, that what they were selling is services for startups and small businesses, from financial planning, financial advice, coming up with their own financial products. And ironically, this concept went on research, but they just could not build the bridge, short-term build the bridge. And so, although this was the future state of where they needed to go, H2 is where we ended up spending and creating the foundation of trust that would allow us to get here. Because if we can leverage these small business experts and migrate half the inventory to online, right, and dial up more of the services in the store, then that would validate on our trust ladder the future of this experience. So again, here's the trust ladder. This is how we mapped out, and I'm showing you a high level. Obviously, we went into micro analysis of each one of these steps, the products, the services, the human resource allocation, marketing allocation, the store layout. All of these things came into play at every one of these steps. We had metrics for each one. And as they moved from one step to the other, it validated and gave us permission to move to the next step. And we opened 5 prototype locations, and we tested each one of those. They were betas. We were flexible. We had 3 in Chicago, 1 in Seattle, and 1 in Portland. And again, we had different store sizes, different service offerings. And at the hub of this was this advice center, and also next to it was an office with the small business advisor and a meeting room. needless to say, this was a huge success. I mean, the first 3 prototypes didn't do well because we continued to learn on how to leverage the small business expert. Actually, the final store, which was in Seattle, had 2 financial experts. They were like mortgage brokers. We identified they can generate 1.5 million each in added value services, and the margin on added value services 30 to 40%, whereas the typical service within an Office Max would be between 5 and 10. So I just want to wrap it up. Basically, the idea here is that it is not so much, I'm not sharing here how we do strategic foresight. What I'm sharing here is once strategic foresight is done, what are the tools you can leverage to bridge to make that link between the future vision and where they are today, and being able to show them that journey, that agile journey, the idea of playing to little wins or short-term wins that build that credibility and that trust. And also look at each step as a challenge, align, define, measure, celebrate, and repeat, right? Once you do that, it allows you to build that credibility along the way. And obviously, when there's other weak signals that emerge as being huge impact, you then shift your strategy accordingly. Thank you.
All right, JP, a major tour de force. My friends, we're going to go to breakouts and you can discuss what did I glean from JP's talk, particularly about visioning, designing, adapting. That's half of our competency model, and we practice foresight, front end, strategy, the back end. So let me break it into groups of about 4 each, and we will we'll see you in about 15 minutes or a little more. Bye-bye. Forget to unmute yourself. All right, JP, let's see where you're at. You're in room 1. I'm going to join you. All right, folks, we're coming back together as a large group. I see we're at our participants are growing in the room. So let's go to reports and start with group 1, Charlotte, John Paul, and Stephen. Thoughts, keywords, ponderies, okay, whatever. Go ahead.
I've been presented the talking stick, so unfortunately you all had me. We had a very interesting conversation that revolved around the linkages between bias, wishful thinking, aspirations, and a critical view of what was possible against what was desirable. And we talked about it in a number of contexts. We didn't talk about banking at all, strangely enough, but we did talk about Africa as a place in which all of this comes together, certainly in Jean-Paul's experience. And we're also sort of thinking about an uncritical approach to bias leads to futures work that's really just an expression of wishful thinking, and how thin the line is, the dividing line between wishful thinking and science fiction. And I know that there's a role for science fiction in what we do, but the question is, well, where precisely does it fit? And I think that's probably said enough. I think you've had your money's worth on this. I don't know if the others have anything to add.
Any other response from room 1? All right, we'll circle back if we keep on the track here. Let's go to group 2. Alex, Catherine, Mark, Sylvie.
So I think I've been voted to me with the big mouth and the broadcast journalism background have been voted to talk. So I'll talk about. I'll make 3 points. The first 2 related to the whole issue of the metathesiophobia and the fear of change. And the first one being, and this is something I said, and it's been a big point for me, and you've heard it from me before, and I think I've seen it more than ever in discussions of COVID and the notion that we could have seen a pandemic coming. Unfortunately, I feel a lot of the time as futurists, we're spending too much time just talking to ourselves or to very narrow project or client interests and not to the world at large and selling foresight. And then we kind of looked at translating. One of the things we took from from Jean-Pierre's talk particularly was translating foresight into action. And of course, clearly, that's you might want to call it foresight paralysis. Is kind of related to metathesiophobia and fear of change, even when you see it coming. And look, I've probably done it in my life time, particularly at times with the stock market, and it said, boy, I saw that coming and I couldn't move, or I saw that, for whatever reason, or with other things in my life, and organizations probably do it all the time. And then third, we kind of talked about how business is changing. Alex kind of said that he thought that as things were getting bigger and bigger, it was killing small business, and a few years from now, there wouldn't be any more small businesses in the U.S. And Catherine and I disagreed. I think we said it more as changing small business. There's a lot of venture money out there. I used biotech as an example, and how many startups or small startups are out there in a lot of areas, including the longevity space, which I am interested in and doing a project in. But also the small retailers may be disappearing. They were anyway in terms of brick and mortar, and they're going more to e-commerce, and they may have to partner with eBay or Amazon. But we thought it was accelerating. Change in that direction was accelerating, but we didn't think it was completely going to kill small business. It's just going to change its nature.
All right, thank you. Thank you, group two. Group three, we have David, Jennifer, Robert, Ruben, and then the refugees from group four, Lee and Tim in that group. But go ahead, group three.
We didn't assign a spokesperson.
Just start us off, Ruben. We'll go to others. Go ahead.
Well, the comment I made is early on, the basic bias that JP presented was teaching people how to see what they couldn't see, teaching the blind to see. I mean, it's almost biblical, of literally helping people to see things that are there, but they don't know how to see them, and to overcome the reasons, cultural, human, personal, all the reasons that there are neurological that they can't see in their own interest. So it's an interesting way of speaking to the core of what our business is about. We're teaching people to see better.
Okay, excellent. Wow, profound. Who else? Group three. Takeaways, insights.
I guess I'll add. We also spoke a bit about we saw a lot of value in the trust ladder that was presented, and how that could be used to help people overcome change and fear of change. Just so that as a sort of a different way of thinking about it, and a good tool to possibly use for that. I'm probably forgetting some stuff, so if anybody else wants to add.
Okay, cool. I'm one of the group 4 refugees. We just want to say, Jean-Pierre, I really like what you've been doing. We live in really similar worlds. I really like the Horizon, the H1, H2, H3 slide. I thought that was a really great and simple graphic representation of how you have to deal with those worlds. We talked briefly about how CFOs and others need to allocate resources across different horizons, and how the metrics for success are really different depending on if you're looking at H1, H2, or H3 activities. I also thought you did a great job of just showing the concrete tactical things people can move to go to the desired future. I think that's super important. And a lot of times, foresight practitioners don't give those concrete tactical steps you need to take to get to a preferred future. And being able to prototype even to stores, showing what that future can look like in that tangible a fashion is awesome.
All right. Anyone else from group 4, whether Tim or other comments, wrap it up, or any group, bring it on. I'll take one final comment and turn it over to JP for a response.
Someone in our group, I can't remember who it was, focused on trust and the importance of trust and wanted to reinforce that. So
absolutely.
I mean,
all right.
given what we've seen in Washington the last 2 days, trust is kind of rising to the surface.
Yeah, trust absolutely critical to brand engagement and brand loyalty. Yeah. Also wanted to add the steps. The stair step slides are also great because it just shows how incremental activities like build to a greater good. I mean, just super practical and tactical, but also it makes something seem much more doable. The small steps.
I'll pop in real quick along those lines, and that is, to be honest, the bulk of our room breakout was taken up in applied trust building, in that we were discussing, Lee and I, the only two in our group, our backstories, which is, I think, an essential part of moving forward. And I think that's also, on a little more meta level, the value of these First Friday events, where we get together as a community and are able to discuss and really build trust among each other and get maybe verification of each other's respective visions and how it checks against the collective realities of our craft. So
thank you.
That part of it, I guess we'll close with that.
Thank you, Tim. All right, JP, over to you. The last word.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for joining during your lunchtime, and some of you early in the morning or late in the evening. So, you know, it's great to get the input because it's a learning journey. And so I appreciate, you know, the question about sci-fi, we're so fortunate. We're so fortunate to live in a time where you don't have to be Steven Spielberg to create a future vision of how your client's going to, or what that scenario is going to look like in the future. There is so much content available where you can edit and put together a video that really tells a story with your client's experience within that story cost effectively. And so our ability to connect what the future scenarios look like to what would the reality of that client's experience in that future scenario look like really makes our job that much easier. And so, you know, creating those visual stories is so pivotal. That's number one. Number two is, so I sat on, I helped found the largest Canadian Graphic Design Association, RGD. We're registered graphic designers. The only ones, there's only two in the world. There's Toronto, Ontario and Australia, I think, and that's it, that are accredited, like lawyers. And but anyways, we wrote, we went out, and this is food for Jay. I led a team that wrote a book on the business of graphic design. I enlisted 12 leaders in the industry, and we each wrote about 20,000 words each. It's a huge book. It's a top-selling book. It's sold 30,000 copies to date. That's something I think we need to do as an organization, is unify our thinking. There are so many great, everyone on this call, you have incredible talent and knowledge. And there's more coming out every day of new practices and new tools. But I think it behooves us that, you know, you said, you know, I think it was Ruben, or I think it was Ruben, or no, Mark said, you know, we need to promote the industry. You know, well, I think books do a really good job of that. And they create that trust ladder bridge to execution by increasing people's knowledge of what we do and how we do it. And so just food for thought, Jay.
We need to pick up another competency model revision, definitely on that. You've already been invited by JP to come to January 29th to a planning committee on Toronto 2021, perhaps in October. So you can register now on the site. We will have a February 5th First Friday meetup on the first Friday. It'll be announced the next 3 or 4 days online. So catch that there. Again, thank you, JP. Just extraordinary. Thank you for keeping fresh to work the future, not only foresight, insight, but action. It's incredible. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye, good night, and good morning to some of you still. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Yes, Tatis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
So long.
All good.